Hey, party people. Most of you know Guo Pei as the designer behind the massive yellow fur trim cape Rihanna wore to the Met Gala. Some of you know Guo Pei as the only Chinese couturier prominent in the Western fashion world. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about her life, deep dive into her career, all to the backdrop of photos of her designs. Guo Pei was born in Beijing in 1967. Her first exposure to sewing was at the age of 2, threading her mom's needles because her mom had very poor eyesight. She graduated from the Beijing Second Light Industry School with a degree in fashion design in 1986. My understanding is that making clothes was or is considered light industry in China. Light as in light versus heavy, not light versus dark. This school is now called the Beijing Institute of Clothing Technology. China considers Guo Pei their first homegrown master couturier, as many of her peers moved west to attend top European and American fashion schools before returning home to start their businesses. She started working at Tianma, which was one of China's first privately owned clothing companies, and continued to work at other companies until she quit in 1997 to start her own company. With the help of her import-export businessman husband Jack, she launched Rose Studio in 1999 and currently employs 500 artisans in creating lavish gowns for Chinese celebrities and private clients. Her business structure deviates from the norm. Her business has been compared to a club with membership tiers. Patrons of her house pay an annual fee, and orders are deducted from this fee. There are 4 tiers of membership, and the top tier spends about $800,000. At last quote, there were about 4,000 patrons. It takes about 2.5 years for these 500 artisans, including 300 embroiderers, to create each collection, and most learn their craft on the job. She has no use for trends. She aims to create heirlooms. She considers her works less clothing and more art. She debuted at China International Fashion Week in 2006 with her SAMSARA collection. Some of her most notable accomplishments include dressing singer ZUYING for her performance with PLACIDO Domingo for the 2008 Summer Olympics closing ceremony. That gown reportedly is covered in 200,000 Swarovski crystals. Guo Pei is one of the costumers of the film The Monkey King, which was released in 2014. This film's costumers were nominated but did not win a Hong Kong Film Award. 2015 was the year of the big yellow 55-pound cape at the Met Gala. That's about 25 kilograms. One of Guo Pei's signatures is to decorate gowns with layers and layers of fabrics and embellishments, and she speaks of these heavy garments showing women's strength. Her works were also in that Met exhibit, which was titled China Through the Looking Glass. It was this event that introduced Guo Pei to the Western world. When Rihanna first called about the cape, Guo Pei had no idea who she was. Later that year, she held her first solo exhibition at the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris and collaborated with MAC on a collection that would go on to sell out completely. Other museum exhibits in the US and Europe quickly followed. The following year was also a banner year for Guo. She is the first East Asian to be invited to be a guest member of the Chambre Syndicale de la Haute Couture, and she presented her first collection on the Paris Haute Couture calendar in January of 2016. She is only the second Asian guest member, just behind Lebanese couturier ELYSIUM. She was also named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people of 2016. Currently in her new Paris studio, she is focused on making a name for herself in terms of French haute couture and does not care for loaning out clothes to celebrities. Guo Pei's life is a prime example of how world events can affect the fashion industry and someone's career. Mao Zedong was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party from 1935 until his death in 1976, and the chairman of the People's Republic of China from 1949 till 1959. During Guo Pei's childhood, Mao suits were considered the only acceptable clothing. Under Mao, the leading rhetoric was that art should serve politics, and her usage of yellow for commoners would have been forbidden. Yellow has long been a color reserved strictly for Chinese royalty. The Cultural Revolution of 1966 was an attempt by Mao to reassert his authority, to purge the country of quote-unquote impure elements. 1.5 million people died, and many of the objects representing China's cultural heritage were destroyed. Despite growing up in this political climate, Guo's home, privately, was full of art and music. Her mother loved to sing, and her father never went anywhere without his little sketchbook. Guo says, "My grandmother taught me about elegance. She was my first teacher. Every night when I was 4 or 5, she described the dresses that women wore in the old days, and I pictured them before I fell asleep." In 1977, after the death of Mao, Deng Xiaoping restored the university entrance examinations, which allowed a new generation to pursue secondary education after the ravages of the Cultural Revolution. And this is how Guo Pei was also able to pursue her own degree in the 80s. Deng, until his retirement in 1992, led China through many economic reforms and is called the general architect of reforms. He opened China to foreign investment and the global market, and Deng is credited with introducing policies that propelled China into one of the fastest growing economies. In the 90s, the government started to realize the economic potential of fashion and formed the China Fashion Association, which sponsored fashion design competitions every year to name the country's best designers. Guo Pei made the top 10 list in 1997. So this was the political and economic climate and progression of Guo Pei's early life. Communism and the Cultural Revolution, the death of Mao, the succession of Deng, and the massive reforms he brought to China. It's through these reforms that Guo was able to pursue fashion as a career. Guo herself quotes a Chinese saying which translates to, "Timing makes a hero," to describe her own career trajectory. Chuti Jansen, founder of media company China Happening, says Guo expresses a visually deprived nation's pent-up longing for imperial grandeur and marvels at her success in a world where the majority of nouveau riche worship Western luxury brand. The documentary Yellow is Forbidden follows her as she worked on the church collection, the spring 2017 couture collection, which she presented in Paris. In this documentary, Guo Pei mentions several times how in her childhood, fashion wasn't even a word people used. She describes the work for her degree as mainly learning how to sew. Her parents were such stereotypically Asian parents. I literally laughed out loud during the documentary. They live modestly, largely unimpressed with her career. And I don't mean that in a bad way where they don't care about her or support her. My biggest takeaway from the documentary was the insight to her personality. There are all these stereotypes and stories about needing to take on a more stereotypically masculine traits to succeed in male-dominated fields like haute couture. And yet, Guo Pei is quite feminine. She collects teddy bears and kaleidoscopes and cackles wildly and is very physically affectionate with her family. She makes funny faces when she's thinking. She's occasionally dorky in this really cute way. And she has this youthful, exuberant attitude towards life and is easily visibly excited by fashion and pretty things. She dislikes the many comparisons to McQueen. As she says, she loves life and hopes her clothes put out a positive message to the world. Her fans wax poetic about her ability to weave East and West together. Students talk to me about not wanting to look at stuff because they don't want to be influenced. They don't want to inadvertently copy. But she's an example of someone who studies the great masters obsessively and still creates pieces that are uniquely her own. Her critics discuss her lack of modernity and for reinforcing the West stereotypes of China and Chinese style. Even her supporters and her own PR firm encourage her to create more wearable clothes that appeal to a more international audience to finance the pieces she loves that are more art than clothing. So am I a fan or am I a critic? My conflict is that on the one hand, there is a mind-blowing level of construction here that some people have not even heard of. There are 24 karat gold embroideries like the strapless dress from the SAMSARA collection and stitching with a thread so delicate it would snap every 7th stitch. And I do love her work. I love many of her works, but I'm not a rabid superfan who loves everything she does. I'm developing this cognitive dissonance about these weird inconsistencies. Most of the photos in this video are unphotoshopped snaps that I myself took at a Guo Pei exhibit at the Bowers Museum in Southern California. I got to see many of her works quite up close. There are these random, jarring construction inconsistencies like clumsily sewn zippers, decorations that look like cheap plastic, asymmetrical positioning, gaps in embroidery, and frayed hems that don't look intentionally frayed. Journalists marvel at her ability to create couture without having studied couture garments up close. And I think this might be her 0.1% gap that she needs to pull up. And you might be thinking, oh, Zoe, you're such a nitpicker. But don't forget, most of these gowns are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I've seen better zippers on $100 jackets. Okay. On that note, I'd like to wrap up with mini reviews of her latest collections. Fall 2018 appears to me the biggest departure from Guo Pei's aesthetic, the least colorful, the least ornate, with the fewest Eastern influences. But I really love this collection, and I think it shows her versatility, and this collection still remains many of her hallmarks. The rigid structures, the layers of sheers, the layers of embellishments, the contrasts and textures. I also think that this is one of her thematically most cohesive collections, even beyond the tight color story. Her spring 2019 collection looks like Guo Pei meets early Knots club gear. The silhouettes look awkward and ill-fitting. This is absolutely my least favorite of all her collections. Of course, there are still some beautifully embellished bits and wonderful dresses, but overall, I think this collection looks the least sophisticated out of all of her works that I've seen. As of this taping, her latest collection was the fall 2019 couture collection. I see this collection and I see the woman who has a collection of 400 teddy bears. This is true. She has a collection of 400 teddy bears. There is a gentle playfulness that is soft and sweet without being childish, woven with her signature intricate elegance. It has been reported in several sources that it takes about 2 to 2.5 years for her to complete a couture collection. So my guess is she started designing this collection right around when she started spending more time in Paris, when she started showing her collections on the Paris calendar. And while she hasn't lost her natural propensity for layering embellishment on top of embellishment, her building up of contrasting textures, her layers of sheer fabrics, this collection lacks the heavy imperial China aesthetic hallmarks. And this collection is the freshest take on dark themes like death that I've ever seen. So that's my Guo Pei deep dive. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today. Share this video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let me know what you thought of this video, if you would like more deep dive videos, and which designer or design house history you'd like to see me cover next. Check in the description box for links to related videos like my What is Haute Couture video. and I'll see you in the next video.